G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 9th of August 2025. In a few hours, we expect to know exactly what Trump's response will be, but I think there's going to be a pause on the tariffs. I'll tell you why soon, but first, I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, Power Games, Into the Elsbound, and The Erotic Tales from the Empire. Part 1 available now. All my books available on Amazon. All my links are in the link tree. My books, link tree. Thank you to all those who support the channel, and I invite you to support the channel through the links in my link tree. Keep doing it again. All right. Now for the news. Zelensky sabotaged peace talks before they begin. He has made an ultimatum. He's made it his mission. He's made it his life's work to destroy Ukraine. This bozo, by the way, he's in London, not in Ukraine, doing this. This coward, this bunker roach, is warning that he will not accept any deal unless it's absolutely 100% his way. Since when in the history of land warfare has the loser dictated terms? This is why the Korean War went for over a year and a half, despite agreements to end the war. This is why the Vietnam War dragged out. This is why the World War II, World War I, they all dragged out because somewhere in a bunker, someone said, any minute now the war will change and come our way. Now, true, World War II could have been over in 1944 if peace talks were even acceptable, but the Allies agreed not to hold peace talks and went on to kill 19 million more people because, that was absolute destruction was more important than ending the war to them. And what did it get? A hollow victory. Again, if Europe wants to enter into a land war in Ukraine, it would be a hollow victory. The cost of victory in Ukraine is too high. Zelensky is a coward, and in 100 years, this is what he cares about, and only cares about. In 100 years, Zelensky, the monument Zelensky, the savior of Ukraine. He's trying to rewrite history, and they're doing this in real time, trying to paint out that he's the victim, that he's the peacemaker. He ran on peace in 2019, okay? Was it 2019 when he started his campaign? Criticizing the war in Donbass and all that, and Ukraine's dead, and how Ukraine can't borrow money because every time they borrow money, they just run away from their debts. That Ukraine is corrupt. And then, of course, he promises to Europeanize Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't need Europeanization, okay? Ukraine needs to be Ukraine. And in order for the Ukraine to be Ukraine, you need to get rid of foreigners like Zelensky, who owe no allegiance to the people of Ukraine and suck up to the globalists. Now, I'm not saying he's entirely WEF. I mean, I'm not sure about Larry Fink's or affiliations as well. But Zelensky sucks to that teat of power, right? He's a globalist. Now, with Russia and US set to meet, I think the fact has not set in that despite the fact Russia not being a military superpower on the ground that could annihilate Ukraine in 48 hours, it's possible, however, that China, and, if Europe enters the war, so will China. So will India. Soon we will have war in Korea, Taiwan, possibly China's expansion into Southeast Asia unchecked, then this is only a probable scenario. But Russia will lose no matter what happens, and so will Europe. Because China will F everything up and occupy, and they'll set the world on fire, okay, to win. Xi Jinping needs a big win, folks. Here's a man nearing the end of his life, whereas Zelensky, he has a narrow margin of survivability. But it's a margin of survivability. Unlike Xi Jinping and unlike Putin, Putin and Xi Jinping know their lives are soon to the end, right? They're like Trump. All they're now looking at is their legacy. When a man gets over 80, that's the only thing they're worried about, okay? Let's face facts. But Zelensky's got a chance to walk away from this, but he won't because he's such a coward. And cowards always fight from behind a bigger entity. You look at Zelensky. If Europe wasn't backing him, peace deals would have been over. And Europe, again, they're driven by not by fact, they're driven by perception. And you look at this time and time again, the left and their fears. They're driven by the delusions, right? That if they defeat Russia, they'll feel safe. No. You won't defeat Russia. China won't let it. This is not like the defeat of Iran, which turned out to be not a defeat of Iran, or the defeat of Iraq, or the defeat. Time and time again, the world has proven, absolutely beyond a doubt, that the uncivilized will gang up on you. Now, Zelensky is whining about occupiers. You're not a Ukrainian, Zelensky. You're a Russian, and you're not even a Russian. He keeps talking about real and genuine peace that people respect. He does not respect peace. This is not a full-scale invasion. The media are lying. Zelensky's lying. And so what if Trump should just tell the truth outright. Right? That this is akin to when America went into Iraq. Okay? There would have been no war of occupation if Zelensky had signed the peace deal. Donetsk and other republics would have been independent. Zelensky would have been independent. But his term would have been over by now. His term is over. He's a nobody who achieved nothing in his political life. He wouldn't get re-elected. He's only fighting because it keeps him in office. Do you know he earns $384,000 a year? You look around Europe. That's more than most European leaders, by the way. That's about, half what the US president gets? But on the economic scale, you look at Ukraine, the average wage is translates to about 5,600 a year. Because their currency is like worth 100th or something. It's pathetic, right? This is not a serious person. This is a corrupt individual. And the problem is, most people don't know that out there, the corrupt people like Zelensky, they sign into law their corruption, right? Their oil commissions and their bonuses, just like how union leaders sign themselves massive pay packets and say how they're the working class. Working class people have to earn working class wages, otherwise you're middle class at the very least. And if you're earning six figures, you're rich. All right, maybe 7. But let's see. The Ukraine war key events, war propaganda. You ever seen an artillery shell that clean? Artillery that clean? And then you wait. Go, wait a minute. Is he standing in front? No, this is composite. Right. Here's the reality. The background is real. The artillery piece is real, but it's posted into the background. It's not there. You look. If he's firing artillery, ask yourself, how are those trees still standing? And why is there no flashes anywhere? There's no even flashbirds in front of the artillery. Ever seen artillery that clean in the battlefield without netting or in the open? Dude, look at his uniform. So you have a composite with 3 layers. You have the background, the artillery piece, and then the man holding the artillery piece. If this is the front line in Zaporizhia, I'm Beyonce. Yes, I do look good. I'm Beyonce. Don't I look better than Sydney Sweeney? Do you think my jeans are better? All right, so there's been a Russian drone attack. This was actually yesterday, but there's possibility that there was one today. But this story's carried over. This is new. This was added earlier. So this wasn't here when the story's been updated. Because, anyway, after Trump's phone call, there was a series of phone calls which started yesterday with the Russian ambassador to the UN, to the US State Department, and from there, those phone calls pretty much worked their way up until Putin and I'm not sure if it was Putin and Trump directly or their the heads of staff and the very the little committees around a world leader that deal with security and travel arrangements, etc., and make all the arrangements. And they said, "You ready, Mr. President? Okay, Mr. President, we're ready to go, Mr. President." You know what happens, right? That they have a schedule on the board and they rearrange things. But as soon as that call ended, Putin was probably already had the Chinese. Actually, it's a lot more than this. There was Brazil and others were involved in this. There was a conference call, and a flurry of calls, all urging Putin to not give an inch in Ukraine, to hold out until the end of the month. That's the speculation. China is trying to leverage the trade war. So is India. Okay, they're now trying to leverage peace in Ukraine. China and India, primarily. Now, the ex-Soviet states who still align themselves with Russia, and Brazil, and many other, and South Africa, and Iran, they want an absolute ironclad deal, right? They're trying to all work it in. They're trying to work in Gaza. They're trying to work all these things in. Gaza, Taiwan, the Korean Peninsula. So there's this. So maybe while Zelensky may be a obstacle to peace, the longer this goes on, the closer we move to World War III, simply because Zelensky's ego. Now, Zelensky is probably also being urged by his advisors, some of whom are most undoubtedly taking money from Larry Fink, because of the sweetheart deals that countries shouldn't be doing sweetheart deals to rebuild with BlackRock, okay? While everybody screams about the Rothschilds, their day in the sun is crumbling. Their empire's crumbled. Most of their empire's actually transferred to Larry Fink, And Larry Fink's days in the sun are crumbling because most of Larry Fink's profits rely on Dubai and other dubious oil profits, where obviously the only way, and you look at every other country who has oil, right? Venezuela should be as rich as Saudi Arabia. Why isn't it? America should be way richer than it is, but why isn't it? Well, that's because Saudi Arabia and UAE and all that, they keep only a handful make profit. Everybody else exists, okay, on phony money. Okay, most of the oil revenue in the United States goes to the United States, whereas in Saudi Arabia, most of the oil revenue goes to I think it's like 58 members of the royal family or something. 90% of it's like a massive, right? Out of that 300 billion, that they make every year, they get something like 5 billion each or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's not the only one. Now, Zelensky keeps talking about adequate pressure applied to Russia. Adequate pressure, adequate pressure. There is no more pressure, okay? And I'll give you a prime example of this. China, during the height of the trade wars, which are still ongoing, but they believe the height of the trade wars was earlier this month, about 7 days ago, Chinese officials came out, 23% drop in trade with the US due to tariffs. But guess what? They claim Chinese exports still grew by 2.3%. How is that possible? Because for every container that isn't delivered to the US, it goes to Russia, it goes to South America, it goes to Africa. Because remember, China could just say this $2.50 item. Doesn't matter what it sells for, they'll write $2.50 on the GDP. And they'll print. Okay, their digital currency. Their currency is not a free market. Okay, if China needs $1 billion, they print $1 billion. It's a closed system. You have the external yuan, or the yuan, and the yuan. And the yuan is a closed system, right? There's no value. It has no value. If China says to 1 million workers, we're paying you 5,000 yuan, and it just appears in their bank account. There's no economy. Okay, there's no treasury. Okay, it's purely digital. If they value their exports at $3 trillion, there's no revenue. Okay? Doesn't matter what it sells foreign, because the foreign assets and the foreign sales don't go back into the Chinese economy. They go into the external Chinese economy. And when you realize that the external Chinese economy, all the profits from that flow back to China in the forms of goods, most of which, electronics, go straight into the Chinese military. It's a closed loop system. So the Chinese military is fed by China, and half of the Chinese military is fed by China. The other half is fed by all the goods and services that flow back from foreign sales. So the Chinese people absolutely see nothing, no benefit, right? Because as the internal economy continues to crumble, because they have no revenue, okay, it's a closed loop system. It is rotting from the inside. And that kind of rot, however, you've seen it. You may think, the Soviet Union collapsed. Maybe it took 25 years. But you kind of remember, right? China could collapse and rebound and be even worse, right? It could be like North Korea. North Korea collapsed. And right, but it didn't. After the Korean War, North Korea collapsed. Okay, the Soviets pulled out. there was a short period of instability. Whether or not who shot first doesn't matter, but there was a war, and China came in and propped them up. And now, pretty much, Russia shouldn't have abandoned North Korea, but should have never invaded Korea. That was only so that Russia could take the islands north of Japan. So if you really wanted to, are you willing to die for Zelensky? Because this what it comes down to. It comes down to, are you willing to die for Zelensky? You've got to ask yourself, what has Zelensky done for you? Right, we look around the map. Is there any way? And yes, there is, but not without foreign forces. Ukraine does not have the resources. Ukraine can strike up to here. Okay? But all of this can start striking back if they were not constrained. Putin has asked various governors, now some of them, of course, are directly under his control, but some of them, like, they want to send a task force into, like, you really think Putin sent no? Yeah, Putin sent 90,000 troops, but the bulk of those just went boink, right? 30,000. Now, this time, of course, it would have to be a task force much bigger. But Ukraine cannot, if they really wanted to, they would. But, of course, we don't know all the behind the scenes. But I'm telling you, right? 9,600 confirmed intermediate range missiles. They don't have to be nuclear. They don't have to destroy the entire map, okay? They only have to destroy government buildings. Omsk, I think, to 200. That's to about 200 meters. That's about the footprint of most buildings. It doesn't matter how tall a building is. You take out its ground floor, it's finished most of the time. Omsk doesn't even have to blow up. It only has to, it's so heavy, it only has to nose straight down for a building to destroy it. We've seen the footage. Those who haven't seen the footage of the Omsk, yeah, it's only been used twice that we know of. But there are test footages showing the destructive capability of the Omsk missile. Now, they're trying to prop up every day how important Zelensky is. They're trying to paint Zelensky as this important person, and he has phone calls with this and that. How did he have a phone call with the PM? Oh, yeah, there you go. So there's a phone call with the PM of Poland. Of course, he's in Poland. He's in an office building. He's on. He flies out. He's flown out of Ukraine every day. He only flies in with the media. This is a CNN leak, confirmed. Confirmed by multiple sources that since 2022, Zelensky has not been permanently residing in Kiev. That indeed he spends most of his time in a bunker in Poland, guarded by the US 82nd. So his personal bodyguards are all all British SAS. This idea that he's made a phone call from here, well, again, if you look at the map, that's not even where Russia's targeting. So, again, I think Russia knows that Zelensky is maybe an obstacle to peace, but he's also an obstacle to any formal, uh, you know what I mean, a proper opposition, something that can rally Ukraine. See, right now, Ukraine is so bitterly divided that it's actually aiding the Russian advance. I think politically, Russia is hoping that enough people well, I think they were hoping by now more, but enough people, I mean, even in Europe, will turn against the EU and say there's more important things than Zelensky's career. But until that happens, until enough people say stop, because you're not defending democracy when you put all your eggs. Technically, it would be the same as all the attacks on MAGA, right? Yet, as soon as you hold up the mirror to them and say, well, everything you say about MAGA is you and Zelensky, they go into horrid frenzy. Because that's the last thing the devil hates, is the truth. And you can see, even though they are small gains, every day small gains add up, and every day more Ukrainians die, simply because people who do not suffer the consequences of war urge the war to continue. And it has seen Russia make some headway here for the first time in years. And I do mean it. It's been over nearly 2 years, I think. Now they are fighting in, and it looks like they're taking on what appears to be, because one of the biggest problems is so much of Ukraine is minefielded and riddled with trenches, and Russia doesn't have big man movements, right? Every one of these engagements is probably only 1,000 men. Well, 1,000 on each side, up to, right? Sometimes they're mostly only 500. They're not big engagements. And there are each arrow is a multiple engagement lasting several hours. Although sometimes they keep them up for days, which is a problem, or they're not even in the proper place. But in reality, okay, it's all wearing down Ukrainian resources. And then when they're worn down, Russia advances. Because it's the little thing called fire control, okay? When Ukraine can no longer counter battery in an area, they can't afford to bring up new artillery. So eventually, after maybe 3 to 6 weeks, maybe sometimes longer, 3 to 6 months, they eventually have to abandon an area. But they pat themselves on the back and say, we're winning. Why? Because we're still free, is their response. But if Russia wanted to conquer Ukraine, which I doubt it, but even if they wanted to, right, they'd still do the same thing. They'd wear them out, push them back, wear them out, push them back. And then when Ukraine will wake up one day and realize that it has no population, most of the women will go with the Russian soldiers because they have money and the Ukrainians don't. Most of these towns will die within 5 to 10 years because they have no surrounding countryside to support them. Right? Even if Russia doesn't occupy them, Ukraine will be a permanent pustule on the arsehole of Europe. Simply because since the 1930s, Ukrainians have been nothing but workers' paradise. You know, everything for the working class, comrade. You know, and that mentality still hasn't gone. That mentality that you owe them a living, simply for living, and the women are just pushing men. At least now, in the last few months, Ukrainian women have stopped pushing men out into into the recruitment drive, because now they're running out of all the good men, right? All the plumbers, electricians, all the people who got secure skills and secure jobs are starting to disappear. And now the women are panicking because who's going to support them? So all these Ukrainian nationalists bought the Ukrainian nation. You killed it. You killed it. Death by Russian. But of course, the West has, pumped out propaganda like Call of Duty and that, painting the Russians as the new bad guys. Because, let's face it, the world's entertainment runs on conflict. And eventually that taste for conflict boils over in the real world. And you have all these low-brow people who support conflict simply because they want to feel something. They want to feel important. And instead of doing something humane for humanity, they think they're defending democracy. But Zelensky's a one-party state, folks. He's a one-man government. Now, again, these tiny towns, there's probably only 1,000 on each side in these engagements. And yeah, you think they would go faster, but remember, tactically, the defender, remember, this ain't a video game, right? You're not gonna, and if anybody's been serious and saw these video games, particularly where you have this big rush of men rush forward, it's like World War One. Basically, the defender just goes, bleh, and even if they win once or twice, eventually your big army becomes a small army, which is what happened to the Russians in by 1917. The Russian army had been decimated. But, that's why Russia is going slow. Now, I don't think the Ukrainian army will. I think by now the Ukrainian army hasn't turned on Zelensky. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Putin was hoping it would happen. But I think Ukrainians have reached that point of let it die. Even that they have no desire, nothing left. It often happens, you have the camaraderie of a closed group, and so you don't care what happens outside of your own survival. And most Ukrainians, I think, are just dreaming of as soon as the war's over, they're leaving this shithole. So they don't care. They're only defending their position to stay alive. And because they hope that, they'll get captured or if they're wounded enough, they get evacuated to Poland. There's just that entire lack of patriotism left in Ukraine. Unfortunately, because it translates into a survival mode, they're not going to let Russia win, of course. But they have no choice in where they're stationed or the position they're in. So they're going to defend their position simply because it means staying alive, because if they retreat, they get killed by their own army. This is the reality, why Zelensky has multiple lines of defense. If one crumbles, the other opens up on it, And there's plenty of evidence out there. Well, was plenty of evidence out there. I mean, the amount of, however, people who defect to Russia is very small, very small. In the initial days of the war, millions left Ukraine in the initial days of the war. But right now, I think the UN put it something like 6, 7 a day. There aren't that many people trickling into Russia. There aren't that many people surrendering simply because there's a fear that they'll get traded back to Ukraine, and that is a genuine fear right now. I think Putin has poorly handled the propaganda war, and had he acted sooner and offered a better amnesty to Ukrainians, I think Ukraine would have crumbled by now. But Russia couldn't afford it, and China wasn't going to. China and India may be funding this war, but they're only just funding this war, the same as Europeans are just funding this war. Now, I thought Russia had abandoned the idea of crossing this bridge to basically secure their flanks. No, they've taken this town and moving up on this town. So they are going to cross over, secure their flanks in this corner against the don't forget, this may be the third line, but it's not the last line. There's an entire line across here. There are multiple east, west, north, south lines in Ukraine. This little piece here, it's not a very good logistics hub, but it's still a hub mainlining into here, and here from, one road in, then one road in, one road here, one road here. It's a logistics hub. It would make sense for Russia to take it out. Same here. Take this town out on the border. Take this out. Take this out. Take that out. And fall onto this. Setting up right through to here. There's no need to fight your way north. You'll just waste time and resources. Just cut them off. Take out the hub. Here. Don't know if they would go up this far, but to cut all this off down here, I only have to cut through here. Cut through here. Cut through here. Cut through here. So all this starts to crumble because the supplies take longer. They're fighting in the south. As this trickles, they're forced up into here. Now, of course, all of this is going to take time that Russia doesn't have. And hopefully, I know, according to Zelensky, they're not going to trade this for peace, which puts Russia in a position of, well, if you're not going to trade it for peace, we'll just destroy everything in it. And then, and that's the problem, isn't it? The sore loser option. You heard about the sore loser option? Russia was pushed in World War II, Stalin, we wanted to destroy Germany. Destroy it. Scatter Germany to the winds. Salt every farm. Of course, the closer he got to Berlin, his stance got softer slightly. But during the Cold War, towards the end of the days of Stalin's reign, he ordered a doomsday. 3 nuclear weapons, the most powerful of their kind. These are 700. They're massive, right? These are massive. This literally weigh, I think, tons. They're literally a cargo ship sized nuke. It's a 3-stage tritium bomb, which will basically, just rock up to San Francisco, boom, and it's what's San Francisco. This is the fear around the world that if things get pushed too hard, that it'll be a doomsday protocol event. Now, of course, Zelensky doesn't care about any of that because he thinks that mutual assured destruction will keep Russia to a land war, and the threat, and this is credible threat, by the way, that if India gets too far involved, sure, for now, China could grow switch its exports to other markets, But those markets are not as big as the US and not as healthy as the US. To say that most of the world is in economic trouble is an understatement. You look at Britain, you look at parts of Europe, you look at most of Africa, you look at parts of South America. All this infrastructure and export from China, trillions of dollars are adding up in debt, and we're now finding that for every dollar China makes, they're spending about two. Right? They're burning their reserves. Whatever cash they can raise, they'll soon be backed into a corner. They've dumped treasury. They've probably dumped, and they're sitting on still about $1 trillion in treasury notes or something, some ridiculous amount. But it's all this war is just going to burn their entire economies. So, but Russia is advancing, and the EU does not care. The EU is approved, and this is how bad Ukraine is. They can't even support themselves anymore. Their economy is unstable. They don't even have a functioning public administration anymore. The Europeans have taken over. I mean, of course, this is all to Zelensky's planning. He's deliberately run Ukraine into the ground. And nobody wants to ask where all the money's going. Now, the EU has already, basically, according to Abe Link, that if Russia and America comes to a deal and EU may join the discussions in the coming months, according to the Dutch, European leaders, even in Ursula von der Leyen and Germany and France, their unconditional support is not as unconditional as it seems. And if Zelensky can't meet chosen benchmarks, now I don't know what these benchmarks are, but they are holding the summit now. When this article was written, they did not know. Zelensky had left Poland, and he showed up in England a few hours ago, and they're holding meetings how to stabilise and meet their targets in Ukraine. Now, their targets are not just economic, they're political, and, of course, they're all about Europeanising Ukraine, which is basically Europe is expanding its clutches on controlling Ukraine. That Zelensky's replacing people with Eurocrats who are Ukrainians by birth or by ethnicity, all trained in Poland and Hungary and that too. By the Soros Foundation and other organisations to basically be good little mindless drones of the bureaucracy, right? That's why they're sinking millions of euros into the new European empire, and Ukraine is their newest acquisition, in which they'll soon start denationalizing Ukraine and eventually East Europe will wake up to this and go, "Nah, we don't want to end up like France, being occupied by Algerians and Africans." No, but that's why they're backdooring this Ukraine war to continue, so they can flood it with Turks and then say, "Oh no, they're not flooding it with Africans," and basically trap Eastern Europe. And Eastern Europe will soon wake up and realise it's in their best interest to form their own bloc, go back to because Eastern Europe did best under the Lithuanian Commonwealth, although it was a much different time, but they survived and came out of the Dark Ages much better than most of Europe. You look at the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, for instance, and the Austrians are looking at it and saying, well, why do we need France? They're our enemy. They've always been our enemy, and they still act like our enemy. They still act like they want to control us. And that's exactly it. Europe does not abide by elections. It doesn't abide by votes, a lot of which are secret. And a lot of them, former leaders, are coming out and saying, it's not a democracy. And Ukraine, what have they done over the last 3 years? They've used up enormous amounts of money. None of it has been put to good use. They could have transformed Ukraine. They could have saved Ukraine. They could have come to a peace deal, but they've sold out. They've given away most of the resources, and I'm not just talking about the Trump deal here. I'm talking about the secret deals they've done with BlackRock. All the industry is foreign-owned, whether it's China or America or Europe. Most of the agriculture is sold off to foreign markets, right? Most of the Ukrainians are gone. And what have you got? And most of the opposition leaders are declared Russian agents. And, yeah, they're turning Ukraine into a colony of France and Germany. That's exactly what they're doing. But, again, Russia is Russia confirmed August 15th, right? Whether or not the fighting will stop tomorrow, I don't know. I thought by now Trump would have made an announcement, but he hasn't. I think the only announcement today was about taking on the cartels. And that wasn't much. There's not much coming out of the White House right yet, but I expect the next 24 hours we'll see a flurry of phone calls. Europe is trying to put together a coordinated response, what their proposal to Trump is. But again, I think Zelensky has destroyed the possibility of peace talks. I think Trump will try to pressure Putin into a ceasefire. But if the Ukrainians won't stop fighting, again, that's what I said. You have to take a huge risk, and you have to have the Russians stop and secure their position and say, right, we're going for a ceasefire, and then have international observers from multiple countries all filming Ukraine failing to abide by it and putting pressure on Trump to say something. Instead of Russia coming out and saying we're going to... Because this is what happened with the Minsk Accords. Every time there was a ceasefire, somebody on the Ukrainian side would start firing and there'd be no consequence. Until Ukraine suffer the consequences of their deceptions, we'll keep getting the same problems because so many people will play politics and just blame Russia. If Russia was to blame, I'd tell you, folks, I do not like Putin. Personally, politically, there are things to admire about his actions, but there's lots of problems there behind the scenes. But it's not just Putin. There's many bad leaders around the world. And the bad leaders are forming a club. And the only way forward would have been to make peace with Russia back in 96, but Clinton betrayed us all. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support me on Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, description below, or in my profile. Thank you to all those who support the channel, and regardless, I'll see you in the next video. Appreciate each and every one of you, and bye for now.